And last weekend we heard the story of Jesus walking on water, right? Where they were out, where the disciples were out in that boat, and there was a huge storm going on, and they saw Jesus walking on top of the water. And Jesus called out to Peter. And Peter stepped out of the boat in faith. And in turn, Peter also walked on water. He performed the impossible by trusting in Jesus. And it was only until his fears got the best of him, it was only until his anxieties about the storm kind of interfered with his thinking that he started to sink into the water. He was no longer standing on water. And Jesus immediately, Peter cried out to Jesus, "Lord, help me." And he was there to pick him up and put him back in the boat. And when they got back in the boat, all the disciples gave Jesus homage and acclaimed that he was the Son of God. So it was a powerful reading last week. And remember, we also pointed out how Peter illustrated his leadership qualities, right? He was the one that yelled out to Jesus, "Lord, bid that I come walk out to you on the sea." He was the one that took that initial first step. He was the one that took that risk while everybody else stayed in the boat. So we talked about different attributes of leadership last week and how Peter's showing that he's a leader. And we will see in the coming weeks that he becomes the first pope with those leadership qualities. Today we're kind of diving into a different area, right? Today we heard the story of a woman that's referred to as a Canaanite woman. And Jesus is in these two areas, Tyre and Sidon. It's always important to understand context, right? Tyre and Sidon don't necessarily mean much to us because we're not Jewish people 2,000 years ago, right? So we don't know what those areas or what's significant. Why is Matthew mentioning that? And it's worth noting that Tyre and Sidon were actually they were well known in the Old Testament, but not necessarily in a good way. They were regularly denounced by some of the prophets for their wickedness and kind of their steering away from God. So Tyre and Sidon is actually like a bad place. It's part of the area where Sodom and Gomorrah was. So here's Jesus as he's entering into this region, and one of the women of the region, referred to as a Canaanite, approaches him. Now, Canaanite, what does that refer to? Well, a Canaanite woman would have been someone that took part in Canaanite religion, right? They had their own religion, and it was a pagan religion, meaning that they worshipped various deities and gods and goddesses. Most especially, the most prominent ones were Baal and Moloch. And quite frankly, it was kind of similar to witchcraft in many ways. So here's this Canaanite woman that practiced pretty much, in a certain sense, witchcraft back in the day with occult rituals and even child sacrifice to their god of Moloch. Here she is, and she's having trouble because now one of her children is being tormented by a demon. Go figure, right? Well, she comes to Jesus because he's known for exorcism and prayer. And she goes to Jesus and she says, "Lord, help me. Son of David, help me." Now, she's obviously not a Jew, right? And she's not a Christian, so she's probably just repeating what other people are saying. She's referring to him as Son of David and Lord. And Jesus doesn't respond. Remember, Jesus knows the heart. It's very important. Jesus sees hearts. He still sees hearts, okay? So Jesus knows the heart, and then he doesn't respond. And then she falls to the ground and gives him homage now. Now she's falling to the ground and giving him homage. The word here used for homage is the same word last week that was used for what the disciples did to Jesus when he got back in the boat. How they fell prostrate on the ground and in a sense kind of worshiped him. So now this Canaanite woman is prostrate. It's almost like she's having an active conversion, right? So she starts off just yelling out the things that everybody's yelling out, but now she's prostrate. And she's saying, Lord, help me. And Jesus' response is, I was sent to take care of the lost sheep of Israel. Pretty much the Jewish people. The people that God entered into covenant with. The people that God made as special people. That's who I came to be working with here. That's who I came to be speaking with. Not worshipers of Moloch. Not pagan worshipers and witches. That's not who I came for. I came for the Jews. And her response is that what's her response? Her response is that, and then he mentions the children, right? He says, it's not right for the children, or for me to give the food of children to the house dogs, right? To our pets. Because the Jewish people were the chosen people of God, right? So it's not right to give what was meant for God's covenant people, for God's special people. Why would I treat somebody else the same way as God's special people? And the key to this is the response of the woman after that. The woman doesn't argue with him and says, hey, I deserve this, or argue with him about something or another, but rather instead she accepts it. Now this is another step of conversion. Now she accepts it, which means her heart is humbled, right? I mean, she's open to it. She accepts it and says, even the dogs receive the scraps of their masters. Masters. Now she's referring to him as a master, an even higher level of conversion going on here. And with that response, Jesus praises her for her faith. Jesus praises her for her faith because of that, because her heart was humbled, because it was almost as if she's accepting the religion. She's referring to him as master now. She converted in this gospel story in the midst of these three responses. And with that, he says, I lost my place. He says, how great is your faith? And he heals her daughter, who has been tormented by demons, likely from the pagan worship. So by understanding this historical context, understanding the Canaanite religion, understanding that this lady was coming from the area pretty much of Sodom and Gomorrah, it gives us a greater understanding of what's actually going on here. Because at first, it kind of seems like Jesus is being a little rude there. It doesn't feel right. But when we understand where she's coming from, that she's coming out of this darkness, this dark area of life, and she's coming to the light, she's coming to Christ, then we understand why Jesus responds when she converts, when she has this change of heart. And that's important for us to really understand the context of that. Because really it points to that really nobody's ever too far gone, right? That no matter what you've done, I mean, in this scenario, we have pretty much, in a certain sense, a witch in our modern day context coming to Jesus. No matter what you've done, no matter who you've been, no matter what your past is, no matter what your race is, no matter what your ancestry is, you are always welcome to Christ. Christ is always ready to accept you with open arms. All that he asks is for an open heart, to have an open heart to receive him, to have an open heart to embrace him in response. And that's the truth. I'm sure there's so many people in our lives that maybe we think that are too far gone, right? That maybe we think that, that guy, he's never coming to church. Or he's done some crazy things. He doesn't feel like he belongs in church. Well, this story is for them. This story is for that person. This story of this person that was so far gone, yet Christ not only accepted her, he performed a miracle for her, for someone that was so far gone. And that's important to remember. That's important to never count anybody out. Jesus is always willing to receive us into his heart, as long as we come to him with faith. God bless you.